What is up, guys? It is Marcus from Perspective Sports, and today we'll be talking about the most volatile division in all of the NFL, and that is the NFC East. And this division has not seen a back-to-back division winner since 2003 and 2004 when the Philadelphia Eagles did it. But this year we may finally get another repeat, and it would have to be the Philadelphia Eagles. But they do have to face some tough competition from a much improved Dallas Cowboys team. And let's take a look at the Philadelphia Eagles. Last year, Carson Wentz essentially willed this team into the playoffs. And in my opinion, he was always worth the contract extension in my opinion. But last season really proved it. And I'm willing to die on that hill. But as far as the stats go, he threw 4,039 passing yards, completed 63.9% of his passes, 27 touchdowns, and only 7 interceptions. And I say only 7 because 7 interceptions is not that much. Plus, when you look at the receivers that he had, he didn't really have a lot to work with. And so the fact that the Eagles even made the playoffs last year was pretty much Carson Wentz in that defense willing this team into the postseason. In this offseason, the Eagles really made it a point to address that issue. They traded for 49ers wide receiver Marquise Goodwin. They drafted TCU wide receiver Jalen Reagor. And I really like a late round draft pick they had. And call me biased, but I really think John Hightower out of Boise State is going to make a sizable impact on this offense in year one. And the Eagles still also have Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson, Zach Ertz, and Dallas Goedert. Now, Deshaun Jackson's on the back end of his career. Alshon Jeffrey's getting older. And Zach Ertz as well is getting older. But Dallas Goedert is one of those young up-and-coming tight ends who could see a really sizable jump this year. Defensively, the Eagles went out and got cornerback Darius Slay from the Detroit Lions, which addressed one of their biggest defensive needs. And overall, the Eagles' defense is still very good. The defensive line includes Derek Barnett, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, and newly acquired Javon Hargrave. The linebacking core is decent, but then you have the secondary with Jalen Mills, Rodney McLeod, and now Darius Slay. And so the Eagles roster is pretty good. It's a really good football team. But offensively, I think it's going to take a little bit of time for them to incorporate all the new pieces. Carson Wentz has to get used to his new weapons and things like that. And their schedule also has some rough patches. From weeks 4 to 6, they'll play at San Francisco, at Pittsburgh, and versus Baltimore. Now, as far as traveling is concerned, that's not rough. You're at home against Baltimore, and Pittsburgh is right up the street. But it's the environments they have to go into. Pittsburgh is a brutal place to play. Then, again, you have to actually travel across the country to play San Francisco. And so they're going to be in some tough environments. And then from weeks 12 to 16, they'll play versus Seattle on Monday night, at Green Bay, coming off that Monday night game, versus New Orleans, at Arizona, which could be a trap game because they're playing 3 quality playoff teams in a row, and then they have to travel to Arizona from Philadelphia, and then they have to play at Dallas, which could be a huge game for the division. And so the Eagles, they're going to have to win the games they're supposed to win and then have to steal some of these other games. They can't trip up in Arizona and expect to be able to win this division, especially with the Dallas Cowboys being much improved. And speaking of the Dallas Cowboys, they probably had one of the better off seasons of any team in the NFL, and it started with hiring former Packers head coach Mike McCarthy, and I think that was a great hire. I was vouching to all my Cowboy friends about this hiring. Yes, unfortunately, I do have Cowboy friends. Nah, I'm just pulling their leg. But yes, I did vouch to all my Cowboy friends that Mike McCarthy will be a good hire for them. And the problem with Mike McCarthy is his tendency to rely on passing. But I don't think that'll be that big of a problem with Ezekiel Elliott, who will be involved in the passing game. And, he'll now have a reason to run the ball a whole lot more. When Mike McCarthy was in Green Bay, Aaron Jones wasn't quite as good yet. And we didn't really have that consistent running back since that rookie year breakout from Eddie Lacy. And so he'll have a star running back off the jump in Dallas. He'll have a tremendous amount of receiver talent in Dallas. The offensive line is still good. He'll have Dak Prescott. So his offense will be there. In Green Bay, he was 135, 85, and 2. That's a 61.3% win percentage, and he's a Super Bowl champion. But some other things that happened in the offseason that were really good despite the Mike McCarthy hiring. I don't mean to say despite because it's not like it's a bad thing. It was a good thing on top of, let's say it like that. So on top of the Mike McCarthy hiring, they re-signed wide receiver Amari Cooper to a 5-year deal. They re-signed cornerback Anthony Brown to a 3-year deal. They brought back kicker Kai Forbath on a 1-year deal. But then they also went out and beefed up the defensive line. They signed defensive tackle Gerald McCoy. They also signed defensive tackle Dante Poe. They brought in defensive end / linebacker Alden Smith, and they signed kicker Greg Zerlin. So it should be a really fun kicking battle to watch in camp. And so I know that's not the most exciting thing I've ever said, but it's something that I'll be paying attention to because I think Kai Forbath is a good kicker, but we all know Legatron. Come on now. So that should be a very fun kicking battle to watch. And as far as the front four is, or the defensive line is concerned, that thing's a problem. You have DeMarcus Lawrence, Gerald McCoy, Dante Poe, and Tyrone Crawford. Then at linebacker, you have Leighton Vander as Jalen Smith and Sean Lee. And so up front, the Cowboys defense is pretty scary. The secondary, it needs some work. But as far as the front seven is concerned, the Dallas Cowboys are legit. And so going back to the offense, offensively, Dak Prescott will have every weapon at his disposal. At wide receiver, he has Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and somehow, some way, CeeDee Lamb. And they still have one of the better O-lines in the league with Ezekiel Elliott. And so this Cowboys team is one of the more complete teams in the NFL. I say that a lot, but there are just a handful of complete teams, and the Dallas Cowboys, if not are complete, are one of the more complete teams in the NFL. And so let's take a look at their schedule, and it's rough. Despite it not getting really tough until the second half of the season, probably the toughest game they have to play in the first half of the season is at Seattle, and that's never an easy game to play. But from weeks 8 to 16, it's on and popping. They have at Philly versus Pittsburgh. They do get a bye week, but then at Minnesota versus Washington, at Baltimore, at Cincinnati versus San Francisco versus Philly. And so now it's not as hard as some other schedules. They get to play Pittsburgh at home. They get a bye week before playing at Minnesota. They get to play Washington on a short week before playing at Baltimore. And so their schedule isn't as hard as some of the other teams that we'll talk about, but it is a tough schedule because playing Philly and Pittsburgh back-to-back is no easy task. Playing Minnesota on the road is no easy task. Playing at Baltimore is no easy task. And then you got to play San Fran and Philly back-to-back. And so the Dallas Cowboys are going to have their work cut out for them, and I think they'll weather the storm pretty well, especially if they win those early games that they're supposed to. Now let's take a look at the New York Giants. And last year this team was 4-12, and that spelled the end of head coach Pat Shermer, who went 9-23 as the Giants head coach. And so the Giants this offseason went out and brought in Joe Judge, New England Patriots special teams coordinator, to lead this team. And I believe it is way too early to determine whether this was a good hire or not. When you look at what he's come from, the New England Patriots, the Giants were interested in him because of the standard and expectations that come with being a New England Patriots coach, and hoping that he brings that to the organization, which, to put it nicely, has been disorganized with no real sense of direction over the past couple of years. And so I'm hoping that Judge will be able to bring that New England stability to New York, but we'll only see as time goes on. As far as the roster is concerned, they had a nice draft, picking up offensive tackle Andrew Thomas with the 4th overall pick. For some reason, the Giants fans didn't like that too much. They got safety Xavier McKinney in the second round, a true first-round talent in the second round. And then they went out and decided they really liked Packers linebackers. So they paid Blake Martinez $30 million over 3 years, and Kyler Fackrell $4.6 million on a 1-year deal. They also brought in cornerback James Bradbury, signing him to a 3-year deal worth $45 million to replace Janoris Jenkins as their number 1 corner. I think the Giants took a step in the right direction by drafting Andrew Thomas to presumably play right tackle, meaning the edge of the offensive line will be Nate Solder and Andrew Thomas, with Kevin Zeitler and Will Hernandez as their guards. And so I think that'll help out second-year quarterback Daniel Jones a lot. And so when you look at what Daniel Jones has at his disposal, he'll be getting Sterling Shepard back healthy to go alongside Golden Tate and tight end Evan Ingram. They still have Saquon Barkley in the backfield. Now, I don't think that offense is explosive enough to, score a bunch of points, be this exciting, be that exciting. But the offense is taking a step in the right direction. And so when you look at the defense, though, the defense is still a huge concern for me. They ranked 30th last season, and they didn't get significantly better. And when you look at their schedule, it's pretty tough. At home, they'll play Pittsburgh, San Francisco, Tampa Bay, Dallas, and Philly, obviously. And on the road, they'll play the Rams, Seattle, Baltimore, Dallas, and Philly, obviously. And so they'll still have to play at Chicago's defense. And so when you look at the Giants' schedule, it's not really the most forgiving schedule they'll have to play. On top of a young team where they have to grow and get used to each other, the defense is still a little suspect. And so I'm not expecting a lot from the Giants. I just want to see how Daniel Jones improves with the pieces around him. But finally, that leaves us with the Washington Redskins, and they'll be coming into this season with a highly scrutinized second-year quarterback in Dwayne Haskins, although unfairly. But last year's draft class was a resounding success in my opinion. Dwayne Haskins had an average year, but wide receiver Terry McLaurin had a really good season. Kevin Harmon came on late in the season. Edge rusher Montez Sweat had 7 sacks, 50 tackles, and 13 QB hits. And so as far as the draft class is concerned for the Redskins last year, I give them a thumbs up. And so when you have 4 potential starting caliber players in a draft class, that's always a good thing. In this year's draft, they went out and selected Chase Young, defensive end out of Ohio State. And that officially made their defensive line one of the scariest in the league. They now have Chase Young, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, and Montez Sweat. They also focused on their secondary, signing cornerbacks Kendall Fuller and Ronald Darby, as well as safety Sean Davis. Offensively, they tagged guard Brandon Sheriff, signing West guard Wes Switzer. It's Wes Switzer. It kind of ran together there. And tackle Cornelius Lucas to help out Dwayne Haskins. And as far as the schedule is concerned, it's much like the Cowboys, meaning it's backloaded with a lot of tough games in a row. And it's actually one of the toughest stretches I've seen so far. From weeks 12 to 17, they'll play at Dallas, at Pittsburgh, at San Francisco, versus Seattle. And so that's 3 tough road games, and then they get to play Seattle at home, versus Carolina, then at Philly. And so the Redskins' schedule is really tough on the back end. Not that we're expecting them to do much anyway, but that's what I think for the Redskins. I think it'll be like the Giants. Let's see how their second-year quarterback performs and see how this team can grow with their young pieces. And now it's time for the division standings to be released. And at number 1 in the division, we have the Dallas Cowboys at 10-6, 4-2 in the division. Number 2, we have the Philadelphia Eagles, 10-6, 4-2 in the division. And then we have the New York Giants at 4-12, 2-4 in the division, and the Washington Redskins at 4-12, 2-4 in the division. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Do you think that the Giants will be a little better, the Redskins will be a little better? Do you have the Eagles winning the division? Let me know down in the comment section below. I look forward to reading them. See you there.